All right, so the year is 2018, 2019, 2018 or 2019. And there was word going around that UFC fighter Cain Velasquez was going to mix it up in the world of Lucha Libre. And he had a match, I think in AAA, and I think a Triple Mania event that year. Maybe it was a different event, I forget. I have a terrible memory. In any event, at first I was like, man, Cain Velasquez and Lucha Libre, that's going to suck. And then I saw the match and I was like, holy shit, I was wrong. That didn't suck. And then there was word that he was going to come to WWE and I was like, hey, this is probably not going to suck. And then I was wrong about that too because it totally sucked. So it's time for another episode of Wrestle Juice's I Was Wrong, where a lot of brave friendos post in a thread that I offer up on the channel that they were wrong about a particular thing in pro wrestling. So we're going to dive into a bunch of those right now. We got a thread of like 180 of these I was wrong takes. Some of you didn't pay attention to the actual meat of the thread because there's a whole breakdown of the subjects that I have already covered in this series. So you got to make sure you're doing your homework, people. Got to pay attention to the instructions when they're given to you. Let's dive into this first one. I'll stop lecturing you. First up, Bucket Dipper says, I was wrong about the Wyatt Six. I thought they'd be really cool, but then Triple H fucked it up. This actually speaks to a larger I was wrong, and that might go for a lot of us when I say, is it possible that we were all wrong about Triple H and how excited we were for him to take over? Look, I'm not in any way, shape, or form advocating for the return of Vince McMahon. Did you guys hear about his weird 80th birthday party? According to like The Godfather, I think it was, he said Vince McMahon was wearing like a Dr. Evil suit. Some sort of, I imagine, gray type deal like Dr. Evil has in the movies. And apparently, I read this on Twitter. I don't know if it's true or not, but he was wearing a producer's headset because I guess he just misses that job so much, which goes to show that no matter how much money a guy has, you can still punish him, because taking him away from the day-to-day operations of WWE, I think probably hurt him more than any giant financial fine could or whatever. Anyways, sorry, I got off topic here. I think the breaking point for me with Triple H, where I'm sitting there thinking, man, this guy's he's waited this long. Like I thought this was supposed to be like, oh, really good stuff, is the John Cena face turn. When it gets out into like, I don't know, my non-wrestling friends, like orbit, then you know it's bad. I went to the anime con they had here in Sacramento last weekend, and I saw my friend Anthony there. Anthony sells like the DVDs and posters and shit like that, a bunch of like cult type niche stuff. And I was like, hey man, how's it going? He's like, hey, how's the world of pro wrestling going? I'm like, yeah, ups and downs, you know, it is what it is. It's treating me all right though. And he said, what did people think about the John Cena face turn? And I was like, I get the feeling you already know the answer to this question. I was like, it was weird. He just showed up on SmackDown and was like, hey, I'm a good guy now. And then he started putting on like a bunch of really good matches. It was really underwhelming and like really, honestly, lame that anybody would just green light this. Triple H sitting back there and like, hey, how about this? What do you guys got? Road Dogg, what do you got? Oh, you didn't know? John Cena's going to do a promo where he thanks Cody Rhodes for allowing him to be a good guy again. And he's going to blame it on The Rock and Travis Scott, but not really by name. Oh, yeah, sure. Let's go ahead and do that. I trust you. What? Really? That's what? That's what you give us? It was horrible. It was horrible. Getting back to the Wyatt Six, though. Man, oh man. Talk about a huge fumble. Back when they sort of had their big reintroduction or introduction or whatever it was, and they were teasing this idea that the guilt and grief that Bo Dallas was facing and dealing with because of his brother's death, like it was all there on the screen. I'm not fantasy booking this shit. It was all there. And then that part, I think on Raw, when like Adam Pearce's office door opens and Bo Dallas is sitting there. I was like, whoa, what the fuck? It was after they murdered everybody on that SmackDown. Oh my God. Or Raw, whatever it was. That was insane. I was like, oh my God, they could do so much cool stuff with this. And I understand injuries happen. I think there was some sort of injury situation, but like now they're just in the tag division. Now they're just in the tag division. So yeah, I don't know, man. It's just everything just feels so kind of mid right now. And I know this is going up after AJ Lee's big return on SmackDown, and that's cool and everything. But like, it doesn't matter if you bring somebody back. You got to do cool shit with them, and you got to make some cool stories for them. And then we can maybe get excited about your product again. Anyways, Triple H needs to step his game up, man, so to speak. He's been waiting for this. You've been waiting for this moment for 30 years, man. You got to give us something a little bit better than we saw with the John Cena face turn, buddy. I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for you. Next up. Joe says Harley Cameron, QT Marshall's screeching lackey from that lame QTV faction, is being recruited as a member of the Outcasts with Ruby Soho. Who thought this was a good idea? Evidently not me, since at first I thought Harley's character was abrasive and annoying, but I'll be damned if she didn't become my absolute favorite part of Dynamite whenever she's on screen. Amen to this, brother. I agree with this 1000%. However, I will say this. Back when those QTV things were airing, could always sort of see whatever Harley Cameron did in that. It was like, oh, wait a second. What was that? That was some good comedic timing right there. That was actually something in this morass of QTV garbage. That was actually pretty good. Who is this person? And then I had no idea she was going to become like a full-fledged wrestler / puppeteer. And now she is an absolute joy whenever she's on the screen. She is absolutely outstanding. And yeah, I'm glad that she took this path to get here, because I like when she's on my television screen. Next up, here we go. Johnny Ace says the New Day heel turn would actually lead to something. I mean, again, hey, Triple H, you had this amazing heel turn. It's a great all-timer. This was an all-timer heel turn. The segment with Big E, and then for weeks, it was nothing. And now the Raw tag division is just sort of like 3 teams, I think. Let's see here. What else? Oh, Batfan1 is going back in time for this one. Eddie Guerrero as a main eventer / world champion. Of all the WCW guys, never thought it'd be him to be the one to make it to the top. This was one of those pleasant surprises, because I was a big Eddie Guerrero fan back in while watching WCW. When I was pretty new to the whole pro wrestling thing. I was like, hey, man, this guy, A, awesome wrestler. B, you could tell, even though they didn't really let a ton of his personality out, that there was something going on there. It will never, ever cease to amaze me the fumbles with which WCW had in their like mid-card. All those names they had loaded up and ready to go, and that NWO / Hulk Hogan ceiling, nobody broke through except for Goldberg. Goldberg's like the one guy who was like, oh, here we go. Even Benoit, they just sort of tossed the title on him at the last minute to keep him from going to WWF, and then he was like, too little, too late, and then he gave the title back, and then him and Guerrero had that great moment at WrestleMania. Look, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, they should put Chris Benoit in the Hall of Fame. But like at the time, before he did all that terrible stuff, boy, goddamn, that was a lot of fun to watch. And yeah, I never thought Eddie Guerrero would have been like a Vince guy. But goddamn, I guess him and Booker T both understood that character matters. And not just character, but a character that can do a variety of things. Because nobody was better at comedy than Eddie Guerrero. And yet, nobody was better at highly dramatic, tension-filled wrestling than Eddie Guerrero either. He could do everything as a character, the drama and the comedy, and he never became a comedy character. He just knew comedy really, really well, and he could mix it with the drama and then put on like the best matches. So yeah, it's kind of not surprising in retrospect, because he was the total package. Same thing could be said with Booker T. Booker T understood what Vince wanted. Somebody who could deliver the comedy, somebody who could deliver the drama, and somebody who could deliver in the ring, and somebody who had a look. And so, yeah, Not surprised. Booker T, we always knew. Oh, this guy was he was gonna do fine. But yeah, Eddie Guerrero. You know, if I had taken a look at everybody that WCW had loaded and ready to go, I'd have thought like Raven would have been at the top of the list of guys who did well in WWE. And he did fine. Like, I think he still has like, I don't know, the hardcore championship record for a number of reigns, but that was a big goof thing. But yeah, I was Eddie Guerrero sitting there after the Benoit main event of WrestleMania that year with Benoit, you know, celebrating the ticker tape coming down. And then it all just got really sad from there. So let's go ahead and move on so we don't have to be sad today. Noah says, Hangman Page. I got into AEW post-Punk incident. Hey, isn't that like 3 years ago today or something like that? So as far as I'd seen, Page was out of his depth, immature, and not all that. His fallen redemption through the Death Rider stories really brought me into AEW and how great of a character he is. And now, Tony Khan is tasked with the difficult task of keeping him interesting. It's weird, you know, AEW and WWE, both the ratings are down because their stories are kind of like mid. And you got to help but wonder, is Hangman the kind of guy who always needs to be chasing something? Or can he be booked as like a major main event level champion? I think I personally love the character. I absolutely love the character. I think he's great. But you got to make sure now that the follow through after he finally achieved what he set out to do, you got to make sure that follow through is just as interesting. And that might mean losing that title more times like they used to do back in the Attitude Era when they had Stone Cold Steve Austin chase that title. He'd get it and lose it, get it and lose it. So yeah, be interesting to see where they go from here with Adam Page. And I was genuinely shocked, very surprised that he was able to go from the character that he was and make that transformation to the character he is now. That's a hell of a performer right there. Let's see here. Next up, we've got Earson Rayner says, Ronda Rousey. Thought she'd be the next big thing for the women's division after her awesome debut match with Kurt Angle versus Triple H and Stephanie. Yeah, I always kind of wondered if it would be a matter of how much will she buy into the wrestling thing. Because everybody seemed to say, I remember being at a PWG show before she signed with WWE, and she was there watching the PWG show, I think with Shayna Baszler. And I always remember wondering, once it was, you know, sort of we realized that, oh, Ronda's coming in the company, is she going to buy into this? Is she going to like buy into what pro wrestling is, where losses add to a story sometimes, you know, as much as maybe more so than the wins. And it seemed like to a degree she bought in, but now she says she talks a bunch of stuff like, oh, they only had me in there with Alexa Bliss because Alexa Bliss was a top merch seller. Never mind the idea that usually the top merch sellers are the people that are really, really popular. And so that's probably good for business. Alexa Bliss has always been pretty popular since she got to main roster, at least. But yeah, so it's kind of hard to get a grasp on like, how much does she really buy into what pro wrestling needs from you? But at the same time, most of her run was under Vince McMahon, and she seemed to like rightfully hate that guy. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about that one. But yeah, you got to think Ronda coming in with the name she had, if she had truly bought in completely and totally wholesale into the pro wrestling thing. On the other end, you know, she did lose in the main event of WrestleMania to Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe she did buy in. What do I know? Let's see here. What else we got? Logan James says, I was wrong about the Hardys continuing wrestling. I was worried they'd tarnish their legacy after AEW, but they've been so fun in TNA. You can't feel bad about this one. Because, like, you know, they've been doing this crazy shit for a very long time now. I think they debuted in like 95, 96 when they were like 16 years old or something crazy like that. And with everything they've put their bodies through, you got to be crazy to think that they would still be going in 2025. But somehow, some way, they are. It's nuts. I don't understand it. How is a guy like Jeff Hardy, who's been through everything he's been through, not just inside the ring, but of course outside the ring, how is he still going? That's wild to me. That is absolutely crazy to me. So, yeah, dude, I don't know what the fountain of youth the Hardy Boys have discovered. I mean, I know that, Matt looks old-ish, but still, he looks good for how much he's been through. I can't talk shit about that. And I'm not. I'm just saying, Jeff Hardy looks like he hasn't aged. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. Let's see, who else here? Moses supposes, I thought Carlito for sure was going to be a multi-time world champion. Sure, I was a teen, but I was very sure. If you watch Carlito's debut in WWE, doesn't he like immediately win the U.S. title off of John Cena or something like that? He had the Apple gimmick. The guy clearly was full of charisma. And then like a year later, 2 years later, something, he's just sort of like a dude. He's just a guy. And it's like, where's the character? Where's the gimmick? Where's the guy? And I don't know what the deal was. If, I think I remember something about like, oh, he had attitude issues backstage. Which probably means he sneezed in the company of Vince McMahon. I don't know. In any event, yeah, when Carlito debuted, I was like, oh man, this guy's got it. This guy's got it. And then soon after he didn't have it. And then it was just gone. And then he comes back and, once again, we got Triple H booking things, but he's like old now, but then everybody else is old too. So yeah, I don't know. Anyways, hey, I want to say thanks to everybody for letting me know that you guys are wrong about this stuff. I love talking about this stuff because it's a lot of fun. Sometimes we talk about stuff from today. Sometimes we talk about stuff from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or whatever. I want to end on this one here really quick because I really like this one. From Christopher Kaufman, it says, old school wrestling. I used to think there was nothing for me in pre-NWO, pre-Attitude Era wrestling. I thought the wrestling was bad, the promos were hokey, and everyone's out of shape. But thanks to the likes of Brian Zane, Deadlock, and your old school wrestling streams, I have a much greater appreciation for how things were done back then. I even wish some of the old school style would show back up in today's product. Terry Funk rules. Yes, Terry Funk does indeed rule, Christopher Kaufman. And yes, that is one of my favorite things about when I used to do those old Twitch streams, and I'd load up some old territory wrestling from back in the day. I love that every territory had its own kind of flavor, and there was such a wide variety of wrestling. There were good promos, shitty promos. Yep. There was good wrestling. There was boring wrestling. There was squash matches. There were like fucking 30-minute long bangers, and every territory had its own flavor. It had its own little culture going for it, and they presented things just a little bit different from everybody else. And I love that about it. So I agree with you 1,000%. Sometimes when you think about old school wrestling, like even pre-Hogan, you think, or, 80s, 70s wrestling, you think, a bunch of boring bullshit, plodding matches, 2-minute matches. And yes, a lot of it was, I remember one of the jokes I'd be making on the streams back then. I'd be like, all right, everybody, how do you think this match is going to end? A roll-up, a cross-body, some sort of some sort of stumbling lariat into another guy who just sort of awkwardly falls over, and you think, oh, maybe he actually got knocked out. So like there was a lot of just like, okay, well, this is a lot of nothing, but goddamn, some of those characters, some of those promos, some of those presentations, they were so good back then. So anyways, that is going to do it for this edition of I Was Wrong. We'll see you guys around.